What would you do if the woman you were about to marry swore she was carrying your child only for your 8-year-old daughter to prove the pregnancy was a lie? It was a crisp October evening in the Denver suburbs. Jack Callahan stood by the tall windows of his living room, coffee in hand, watching the golden leaves fall gently in the backyard. The fireplace crackled softly nearby, and on the thick rug just in front of it sat Emily, his 8-year-old daughter, intensely focused on arranging chess pieces. To anyone else, it might have seemed like an ordinary evening in the life of a wealthy single father. But to Jack, this moment was everything. Peace, routine, family. The kind of life he had fought hard to rebuild after the heartbreak years ago. Emily was no ordinary little girl. She was brilliant, observant, and deeply intuitive, traits that sometimes caught even Jack off guard. While most kids her age watched cartoons, Emily preferred flipping through anatomy books from her father's clinic. She once memorized all the cranial nerves for fun. It was her way of staying close to him, he realized, through science, precision, and things that made sense. After her mother, Rachel, walked out on them with nothing more than a handwritten note and a suitcase, Emily had quietly decided that logic was safer than emotion. Jack set down his mug and walked over. "What's the strategy today, champ?" he asked, kneeling beside her. She gave him a small, sly smile. "I'm trying something new. Queen's Gambit." "Of course you are," he chuckled. "Want a rematch?" Before she could answer, the sound of heels echoed down the hallway. Ava Monroe stepped into the room with practiced grace. Her hand rested gently over her stomach, a gesture that had become familiar in the past few weeks. At 36, Ava was elegant, soft-spoken, and almost ethereal in the way she carried herself. They'd met 6 months ago at a medical conference in Chicago. She'd approached him with thoughtful questions about pediatric care. Polite, curious, vulnerable. The kind of woman who didn't seem to care about his money, only about the mission behind his clinics. And when she'd told him she was pregnant 3 weeks ago, something shifted in him. It had been years since Jack had allowed himself to dream of a bigger family. The idea of Emily having a sibling, of having someone else to love, had felt like a second chance, something he didn't know he was still waiting for. But tonight, Emily had been quiet. Too quiet. "My 2 favorite people," Ava said with a warm smile gliding toward them. "Emily, sweetheart, isn't it bedtime soon?" Emily didn't look up from the board. "I was just asking Dad a question about pregnancy." Ava paused, a flicker of surprise passing across her face. "Oh?" "Yeah," Emily said casually, still moving her chess pieces. "I read that pregnant women aren't supposed to eat raw fish. Is that true?" Jack raised an eyebrow, glancing toward Ava. She let out a light, melodic laugh. "Oh, honey, every pregnancy is different. Some women have different tolerances. Dr. Logan says everything's progressing beautifully." "No restrictions necessary?" Emily nodded slowly, eyes still on the board, fingers tightening slightly around the black queen. Jack noticed. He didn't say anything. He knew that look, that stillness. It meant her mind was working quietly, deeply. Ava leaned into Jack, looping her arm through his. "You've been so amazing through all of this. I still can't believe I'm lucky enough to be building a family with someone like you." He smiled and kissed her forehead. But in the back of his mind, something tugged. Not distrust exactly, just unease. And that feeling had started a few days ago, when Emily first asked him, "Daddy, do you think people ever lie about being pregnant?" At the time, he had laughed it off. But now, later that night, after Ava had gone upstairs to take a bath, Emily stood by the doorway to Jack's study. "Dad?" "Yeah, sweetheart?" She walked in, hugging her notebook to her chest. "Do you remember what you taught me about being a good doctor?" Jack smiled. "Always listen. Always check the details. And never ignore what doesn't add up." Emily's voice was small. What if someone was saying something about their body that didn't make sense medically? Jack tilted his head. "Are you talking about something in your books, or—" She hesitated. "I think she's lying," Emily said softly.
I think Ava's not really pregnant. Jack felt the air leave the room. He tried to speak gently.
That's a serious thing to say, Emily.
I know, she whispered, eyes brimming, not with fear but with certainty. But I've been paying attention. She doesn't act like she's really pregnant.
Her stories keep changing. And I saw something on her laptop, a file with someone else's name on it. It was an old ultrasound.
From last year, Jack blinked. His daughter's face was calm, but her hands clutched the notebook tightly. I wrote it down.
The date, the name, everything. Just in case.
Jack stared at her, this tiny, fierce, brilliant person he was raising, his little girl. And in that moment, he realized something terrifying.
She might be right. Jack Callahan didn't sleep that night. He lay awake in his darkened bedroom, staring at the ceiling, Ava's soft breathing beside him, like a slow metronome of trust or something pretending to be. The words his daughter had whispered hours earlier played on a loop in his head. I think she's not really pregnant. Emily had never said something like that before, certainly not without reason. She was methodical, cautious, and precise, just like him, just like her mother used to be, before she left. The next morning, Jack walked into the kitchen to find Emily already awake. She was sitting at the breakfast bar, a bowl of oatmeal untouched in front of her, flipping through a well-worn medical textbook from his clinic. She looked up. You didn't sleep either. He didn't respond right away, just poured himself coffee and leaned against the counter. You're really serious about this, aren't you? He finally asked. Emily nodded. I know how it sounds, Dad. But I've seen things. Little things. Jack took a sip, then sat down across from her. Tell me. She reached for her notebook, the same one she always carried, filled with neat, tiny handwriting and sticky tabs poking from the edges. She says she's 10 weeks pregnant, Emily began, but she never talks about fatigue or breast tenderness, no food aversions. She drinks citrus juice every morning, which usually makes morning sickness worse. And when she showed you that ultrasound on her laptop, Jack tensed. What about it? Emily flipped to a page in her notebook. It was dated last year, October 15th. I saw it when she turned the screen toward you. I memorized it. Jack blinked. That's not possible. She showed you that image last week, but the name on the patient file wasn't even hers. It said Sarah Mitchell. Jack stared at his daughter in stunned silence. She doesn't know I saw it, Emily added softly. But I did. And I checked online. The image is a real ultrasound format, but it can be downloaded from certain training databases or copied from someone else's file. Jack leaned back, trying to process what he was hearing. You think she forged medical documents? I think she's pretending, Emily said, eyes steady, and Dr. Logan might be helping her. Jack swallowed hard. Dr. Logan Pierce, the OB-GYN Ava had insisted on using. He hadn't thought twice until now. You said she acts differently when I'm around, he murmured. Emily nodded. She touches her belly, smiles a lot, says things like, the baby kicked. But when she's alone, when she thinks I'm not watching, she doesn't act like anything's changed. I don't think she's preparing for a baby at all. She's just performing. Jack ran a hand down his face. He wanted to believe there was a mistake. That his daughter was imagining things. That she was jealous. That maybe she was just scared of change. But deep down, Jack knew Emily didn't make accusations lightly, and she'd never lied to him. Not once. He looked over at her again, so small, yet so composed. This is a big deal, Emily. If what you're saying is true... I know, she said quietly. That's why I wrote it all down. Jack exhaled slowly. Okay, we need help. That afternoon, Jack made a call. Not to a doctor, to Mr. Whitaker, his longtime driver, handyman, and most importantly, a retired police investigator. Jack had hired him 5 years ago to help with security, but the man had become like family. He taught Emily chess, told her old detective stories, trusted her judgment more than most adults. When Whitaker arrived, Emily handed him the notebook. He sat at the kitchen table, reading in silence for several minutes. Then he leaned back, impressed. "This is meticulous," he said. "You've got timestamps, behavioral notes, even questions about hormone levels." "Where'd you learn all this?" Emily shrugged. "Dad's books, and I watch." Whitaker turned to Jack. "She might be onto something." "You believe her?" "I've seen cops with less evidence try to file reports." He tapped the notebook. "And I've seen liars who smile too much, say the right things, but get sloppy when they think no one's looking." Jack's jaw clenched. "So what do we do?" he asked. "You let me look into Dr. Logan quietly. And we keep Ava comfortable. Don't spook her. If this is a con and she feels cornered, she'll bolt." Jack nodded slowly. "And Emily? She's already 10 steps ahead of us." Whitaker smiled gently. "But she's still a kid. Keep her close." That evening, Ava made dinner grilled salmon with asparagus. Emily said nothing, but Jack watched her closely, watched how she barely touched the salmon, watched how Ava poured herself a glass of red wine without hesitation. Then, when Jack gently asked, "Is that safe?" Ava simply laughed. "One glass won't hurt. Dr. Logan said it's fine." Emily didn't say a word. But her fingers, under the table, tapped out a rhythm Jack had learned to read as a sign of tension. Later, as Jack tucked her into bed, she whispered, "She shouldn't be drinking that." "I know," he said softly. "We're going to figure this out." Together. Emily looked up at him. "You believe me?" Jack nodded. "I do." She smiled faintly. "Good, because I think we're running out of time." Jack Callahan was a man of science. He built his fortune not on luck, but on precision on diagnosis, protocol, evidence. As the founder of a vast network of family clinics across 3 states, he had spent the last 2 decades helping others navigate uncertainty. But now, standing in his own home, Jack found himself caught between 2 powerful truths: the hope of a complete family and the unshakable certainty in his daughter's eyes. He wanted Ava's pregnancy to be real. He wanted Emily to have a sibling. He wanted to believe in second chances. But something wasn't adding up. And that was something Jack Callahan could never ignore. The next morning, Jack sat at his desk, staring at Ava's medical documents she had casually left in the home office. They looked legitimate: ultrasound images, prenatal charts, appointment schedules with Dr. Logan Pierce. But Jack had seen enough real records in his life to know formatting mattered, details mattered. Metadata didn't lie. He opened the laptop and found the file Emily had referenced, the ultrasound Ava had shown him. He hovered the cursor over the file. Properties, details, date, created, October 15th, last year. His stomach dropped. Emily had been right. Again, the patient name embedded in the file? Sarah Mitchell. Who the hell was Sarah Mitchell? Jack leaned back in his chair, heart pounding. He felt the edges of his world beginning to fray. He grabbed his phone. "Mr. Whitaker, I need you to find out everything you can about a woman named Sarah Mitchell and dig deeper into Dr. Logan Pierce's practice history." Quietly. Whitaker's voice on the other end was calm, efficient. On it. That evening, Ava was glowing again. She floated through the house in a pale blue dress, hand resting gently on her stomach as she described her latest prenatal appointment in soothing detail. "Dr. Logan says the baby's heartbeat is perfect," she told Jack over dinner. "It was so strong." "Like a drum." Jack watched her closely. "Did you record it?" Ava blinked. "What?" "The heartbeat." "Did he let you record it?" She hesitated for a fraction of a second. "No. You know how he is. Very by the book." Jack nodded slowly, forcing a smile. "Of course." Emily, seated beside her father,
remained silent. She picked at her food, eyes fixed on Ava.
Measuring. Later that night, Jack stepped into Emily's room. She was reading, no surprise there. The book was Gray's Anatomy for Students. Jack smiled despite himself. "You're too young to be this serious," he teased gently. Emily looked up. "You saw the file, didn't you?" He nodded. "I did." Her face didn't change. "Do you believe me now?" Jack sat on the edge of her bed. "Emily, I never didn't believe you. I just wanted to be wrong." She reached for his hand. "It's okay, Daddy. Wanting something doesn't make you blind. Ignoring it does." Her words, spoken with such quiet clarity, hit him harder than any diagnosis ever had. "You know," she added, "I've been reading about HCG levels. They're the hormones that make pregnancy tests show positive. Did you know someone can manipulate them with supplements?" Jack blinked. "Where did you read that?" "Online. And in your textbooks." She paused. "I think she's taking them." "I saw a bottle in her purse labeled H-Charge, with no prescription." Jack's breath caught. "You saw that?" Emily nodded. "This morning." "She took 2 with orange juice." Jack closed his eyes, a slow anger rising, not just at Ava, but at himself. How had he missed all of this? How had he, a man who trained doctors for a living, let himself be fooled? "Because you wanted to believe," a voice inside him whispered, "because love is blind when it's starving." The next day, Whitaker returned with news. "There's a Sarah Mitchell," he said, handing Jack a manila folder. "Dental hygienist in Portland. Had a completely normal pregnancy last year. Ultrasound records match the ones Ava showed you. I spoke to her, she's never met Ava. Had no idea her medical files were accessed." Jack felt his chest tighten. "And Dr. Logan?" he asked. Whitaker's face darkened. "You're going to want to sit down." Dr. Logan Pierce, according to the research, had been involved with 3 other women in the past 2 years, all claimed pregnancies that ended in late-stage miscarriages, just weeks after expensive commitments were made by their partners. Engagement rings, prenatal donations, real estate deals. Each time, Dr. Logan had been the attending physician. Each time, the pregnancies were unverifiable after the fact. And each time, the couple quietly separated and no charges were filed. Jack stood in stunned silence. "This is a pattern," he said softly. "They've done this before. And they're doing it again," Whitaker replied. "To you." That night, Jack didn't say a word to Ava. He watched her closely. He watched her fake smile, her carefully chosen words, the way she reached for her belly at convenient moments, never once flinching from real pain. And he watched Emily, silently sitting across the table, eyes never leaving Ava's face. Jack realized something then. He was no longer trying to prove Ava was lying. He was trying to prove his daughter's trust was the only thing that had ever truly mattered. Jack Callahan sat in his office, the city skyline stretching wide behind him, but all he could see was a single image frozen on his laptop screen. An ultrasound. A beautiful one, at first glance. Except it didn't belong to Ava Monroe. It belonged to Sarah Mitchell, a woman who had never even met Ava. Her name embedded in the image's metadata was the first thread unraveling a web Jack hadn't even known he was trapped in. And now the whole tapestry was beginning to come undone. Across the desk sat Miss Thelma, Jack's head nurse and most trusted medical confidant. At 60, she had helped Jack build his first clinic from the ground up. She had watched him rise, watched him fall in love, and stood quietly by during the heartbreak that followed. She also had no tolerance for lies. "I triple-checked the file," she said, her voice low but firm. "The ultrasound Ava showed you? The file was modified, name changed, contact info changed. But the original date stamp remained, October 15th last year." Jack rubbed his temples. "So the image wasn't just misfiled. It was doctored." Miss Thelma nodded. "Whoever did this knew just enough to be dangerous, but not enough to erase everything.
And Dr. Logan Pierce? His records are sloppy at best and suspicious at worst. She slid over another folder. Prenatal visits logged every 2 weeks.
But no weight gain, no blood pressure trends, no HCG tracking.
It's like someone was filling out the chart just to make it look busy. Jack felt a wave of nausea rise. He had trusted this, trusted them.
How long have you suspected? He asked. I started wondering when Emily asked me about ultrasound file formats, Miss Thelma said with a dry smile. Most 8-year-olds don't care about DCM metadata. Jack couldn't help but laugh bitterly.
She's extraordinary. She's a Callahan, Miss Thelma said proudly, just like her father. That evening, Jack gathered his 2 most unexpected allies in his kitchen.
Emily, his 8-year-old daughter turned truth detective, and Mr. Whitaker, his driver, chess coach, and former homicide investigator. The 3 of them sat around the table like some odd little task force of 2 adults and a girl barely tall enough to see over the counter, flipping through files and discussing patterns of deception.
Whitaker opened a folder. Here's what we know so far. Ava used a real ultrasound from another patient, Sarah Mitchell. That file was altered to display her name. We've confirmed Dr. Logan's involvement in 3 similar incidents over the last 2 years. Women, fake pregnancies, wealthy men, sudden miscarriages. Emily tapped her pencil. I think the supplements are important. She's taking HCG pills, right? Jack nodded. That's what you saw in her bag? Yeah, and they can make pregnancy tests come back positive.
If she's using them regularly, she could fool anyone without a blood test. Miss Thelma, who had joined them, added, and Dr. Logan would know that. He could fabricate records to match. Whitaker leaned forward.
So the question becomes, what's their goal this time? Emily didn't hesitate. She wants to marry Dad. Everyone turned to her. She talks about it a lot when he's not around, she said. Like she's planning it, dropping hints, and once they're married, even if she loses the baby, she still gets stuff. Jack blinked. What kind of stuff? Emily shrugged. Money? Security? A reason to stay. She thinks if she's his wife, he won't leave her. Whitaker looked at Jack. It fits the pattern. Jack's voice was low. So what do we do? They crafted a plan. Step 1, stay calm. Don't confront Ava yet. Let her feel in control. Step 2, collect irrefutable evidence, preferably something current, something they could document. Step 3, create a scenario where Ava and Dr. Logan would be forced to validate the pregnancy under real scrutiny. Emily called it the trap, and honestly, it was brilliant. We get her to agree to a second opinion, she said, a fancy hospital, somewhere she can't say no to. Then we record what happens when she can't fake it anymore. Jack smiled. You sound like an FBI agent. Emily beamed. I've been watching documentaries. The next day, Jack sat with Ava in their sunlit living room, playing his role as the doting, protective partner. He spoke softly, lovingly. I've been thinking, he said, stroking her hand. I want the best for you. For the baby. There's this hospital, Metropolitan Women's Center. They have the top prenatal care program in the state. I want us to go there. Ava froze for just a moment, barely noticeable, but Jack saw it. They'll want to do an ultrasound, of course, he added casually. Blood work, full history. Ava's smile twitched. That's thoughtful, but Dr. Logan already has all my records. I feel really safe with him. Jack squeezed her hand gently. Of course, but I think 2 doctors are better than 1, right?
Besides, I already called. They have an appointment open tomorrow. Dr.
Grace Howard, head of obstetrics, she's amazing. Now Ava's eyes flickered. Tomorrow? Jack nodded, watching her carefully. You and me. Together. I want to hear the heartbeat myself, with my own ears. For a long moment, she didn't speak. Then she leaned in, kissed his cheek, and said, That sounds wonderful. But her fingers trembled. That night, Jack sat at Emily's bedside. "You did good," he whispered, brushing her hair back. She said yes. Emily nodded.
"Then tomorrow, we'll know everything." He looked at her, this little girl with the heart of a warrior and the mind of a surgeon. And for the first time in days, Jack Callahan allowed himself to hope. Not that Ava was telling the truth, but that the truth itself was finally within reach. The Grand Metropolitan Hotel ballroom shimmered in soft pink and blue. A string quartet played softly in the corner. Waiters in white gloves floated between clusters of well-dressed guests, offering champagne and pastel macarons. Rose gold balloons hovered near the chandeliers, and a three-tier cake half pink, half blue stood at the center of the room. To everyone present, this was a celebration. A joyful moment in the life of Jack Callahan, the brilliant medical entrepreneur finally settling down with a woman who, rumor had it, was carrying his child. But Jack's smile was a mask, and his 8-year-old daughter, Emily, she was watching everything. "She planned this whole thing perfectly," Jack murmured to Mr. Whitaker, who stood beside him like a silent shadow. "She wanted attention," Whitaker replied, "and credibility. Announcing a baby's gender in public makes the pregnancy feel undeniable." "But we're flipping the script today." Whitaker gave him a quiet nod. "Is the other team in place?" Jack glanced toward the far end of the room where Miss Thelma and Dr. Grace Howard were seated, disguised as ordinary guests. Dr. Grace was Metropolitan Women's Hospital's top obstetrician and their secret weapon. Everything was ready, except Ava didn't know she was about to be checkmated. Emily stood quietly near the dessert table, her navy dress perfectly pressed, hair pulled back in a neat ponytail. She looked older tonight, not just because of the dress, but because of the burden she carried. Her father had asked her to stay silent unless absolutely necessary, but if the moment came, she would speak. She always had. "Daddy," she whispered, tugging at his sleeve as guests gathered near the stage, "can we talk before the announcement?" Jack knelt down, his voice gentle. "What is it, sweetheart?" "Are you nervous about having a little brother or sister?" Emily shook her head quickly. "No, it's not that." Before she could say more, Ava appeared beside them, glowing in a flowing pink dress, her hand resting delicately on her belly. She was the picture of elegance and maternal bliss. "There you are," she said cheerfully. "Everyone's waiting." "Are you ready to find out if you're having a little brother or sister, Emily?" Emily's face paled. She looked up at her father, eyes filled with urgency. "Daddy, please. I need to tell you something important about the baby." Jack felt a cold chill run down his spine. Something in her tone, so calm, so serious, cut through the music and laughter. "What about the baby, honey?" Emily glanced around at the buzzing room, then back at Ava, who was smiling that perfect smile. "She's not having a baby," Emily whispered. "I saw the ultrasound file on her laptop, the same one she showed you." "It's from last year. The name wasn't hers." Jack froze. He stared at his daughter, hoping, praying that this was some mistake. But Emily's green eyes were steady, confident, certain. And then something unexpected happened. Ava's voice dropped, still gentle but with an edge Jack had never heard before. "Emily, sweetheart. You must have seen something else. Sometimes documents look similar." "I know what I saw," Emily said, louder this time. "The date was wrong." The name was Sarah Mitchell. The chatter around them dimmed. Heads began to turn. Guests paused, forks suspended over half-eaten cake slices. "Emily," Ava said, her tone sharpening, "that's a very serious thing to say." Before she could finish, Dr. Logan Pierce appeared at her side, his professional smile fixed like armor. "Everything okay over here?" he asked. "We're ready for the big moment." Jack straightened. His voice was calm. "Actually, there's been a change of plans." The crowd parted as Jack stepped forward, mic in hand. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, smiling faintly, "before we reveal anything, I'd like to introduce someone special. He gestured toward the back of the room. Dr.
Grace Howard rose and walked forward, every bit the composed professional. This is Dr. Grace Howard, Jack continued. She's head of obstetrics at Metropolitan Women's Hospital, and she's agreed to conduct a full prenatal evaluation for Ava beginning today. Gasps rippled through the room. Ava's smile faltered. What? She said, trying to laugh. Darling, we talked about this. Dr. Logan has been handling everything. Dr. Grace stepped in, voice warm but firm. It's standard protocol, especially when significant announcements are made. A second opinion ensures everything is on track. I've reviewed the ultrasound image you shared, and I'd love to compare it to the original files from Dr. Logan's system. Doc? Logan stiffened. That won't be necessary. But it is, Jack said, his voice suddenly steely. In fact, we'll need the source files. Full metadata, no screenshots. Ava's eyes darted between the three of them, and then to everyone's shock, Emily stepped forward. Her voice was soft, but it silenced the entire room. Why does the ultrasound on your computer have a different patient name than yours, Ava? The question hung in the air like a fire alarm no one could turn off. Dr. Logan's face crumpled. I can't do this anymore, he muttered, looking down. Ava's head snapped toward him. Don't. It's over, Ava, he said. They know. He turned to Jack. There's no baby. There never was. The room erupted into gasps, whispers, and stunned silence. Ava stood motionless, one hand still over her stomach in a gesture that now felt absurdly tragic. I'm sorry, she said finally, her voice barely audible. I just wanted to matter. Emily looked up at her father. Jack's heart was breaking, but not for Ava. It was breaking for the woman who'd tried to fabricate love, and for the daughter who'd had to uncover the lie. He wrapped his arm around Emily's shoulders, and in that moment, with the party crumbling around them, Jack realized something profound. The most important truth he'd ever hear had come from the smallest voice in the room. The waiting room at Dr. Logan Pierce's private clinic was quiet, too quiet. Jack Callahan sat beside Ava Monroe, holding her hand like any excited father-to-be would. Ava wore a soft blush dress and a nervous smile, her eyes darting toward the clock on the wall every few seconds. Emily sat across the room, pretending to read, but watching everything. Mr. Whitaker, seated nearby, gave a small nod to Jack. Everything was in place. And Ava. She had no idea the walls were closing in. Dr. Logan appeared right on time, in his usual crisp lab coat, face unreadable. Mr. Callahan, he greeted warmly. Ava. And Emily, ready to meet your little one again? Jack smiled. More than ready. And I actually have a little surprise. Dr. Logan paused. Oh? I've invited someone to join us remotely. Grace Howard, from Metropolitan Women's Hospital. She'll be consulting via video call. Logan's expression didn't change, but Ava's hand in Jack's grew instantly cold. She's been helping review our records, Jack added, and she's very excited to see today's ultrasound in real time. Logan hesitated, then forced a smile. Of course. The more experts, the better. Inside the exam room, the air was sharp and sterile. Jack set up the video call on his phone and propped it up facing the ultrasound machine. Doctor. Grace's calm face appeared on screen. Good morning, everyone, she said cheerfully. Ava, it's a pleasure. Dr. Logan, thank you for allowing this consultation. Ava barely managed a nod. Her fingers trembled as she adjusted her dress to lie back on the table. Jack sat beside her. Emily stood quietly in the corner, small hands clasped, wide eyes trained on everything. Doctor. Logan applied gel to Ava's belly and placed the wand down with careful precision. But there was no heartbeat, no movement. No baby. The screen flickered static. Doctor. Grace's voice came through the phone. Dr. Logan, I'm not seeing anything. Could you please verify the equipment settings? Logan swallowed hard. There must be some interference.
the machine. Switch to the backup monitor, Jack suggested calmly. And while we're at it, I'd like you to upload the original ultrasound files to Dr. Grace's secure server. She'll need the metadata, Doctor.
Logan froze. I don't think that's necessary, he said tightly. Some files may not have transferred properly. Then let's pull them directly from your system, Doctor.
Grace said, Live right now. Should only take a second. Ava suddenly sat up.
I don't feel well. Maybe we should reschedule. Jack gently guided her back down. Let's just get your vitals checked first.
We're already here.
Dr. Logan looked at Jack, then at Ava, then at the machine, and cracked. I can't do this, he muttered, stepping back.
Ava turned to him in horror. Ben. Dr. Grace's voice on the phone was sharp now.
Dr. Logan, are you saying the patient is not pregnant? His voice was hollow. There was never a pregnancy. Not this time, not with her. Emily gasped. Ava covered her face with her hands.
Jack leaned back in his chair, the breath leaving his lungs in a long, painful exhale. Despite all the signs, despite all the clues, hearing the words aloud still hit like a hammer to the chest.
Doctor. Grace's voice came through again. Mr. Callahan, I'm required to report this immediately. This constitutes medical fraud. Dr. Logan nodded numbly. I'll cooperate. Jack turned to Ava, whose shoulders were shaking with silent sobs.
I didn't mean for it to go this far, she whispered. Then why? Jack asked. Why the ultrasound?
Why the pills? Why lie to my daughter? Ava looked at Emily, then at the ceiling. Because I thought if you believed I was carrying your child, you'd never leave, she said through tears. I've been left so many times. I just wanted something real. A family. I thought I could become essential to you. Emily stepped forward then, her voice small but unshakable. You can't force love with lies. Real families tell the truth, even when it's scary. Ava's lip trembled, and for the first time, she looked not like a villain, but a deeply broken person, shattered by her own desperation. Later, Jack, Emily, and Whitaker sat in the clinic's private lounge, the door shut behind them. No one spoke for a while. Finally, Emily said, She still doesn't understand what love is. Jack nodded slowly. But you do. Whitaker turned to Jack. We'll need to forward this to the authorities, but what about Ava? Jack thought for a long moment. Then he pulled out his phone. Tell Dr. Grace I'll support prosecution if needed, he said. But I want Ava to get help, real help. Whitaker nodded. Emily leaned against her father's side. You're not mad at me? He looked down at her, eyes soft. You saved me. She blinked. I did? You saved me from marrying someone who didn't love me for the right reasons. You protected our family. You were braver than most adults. Emily's eyes welled with tears. I didn't want us to get hurt again. Jack wrapped his arms around her. We won't. Not anymore. Outside, the sun was setting, but inside that small, quiet room, a new beginning was rising. The clinic felt colder now. Not because of the air conditioning, but because of the silence that followed Dr. Logan Pierce's confession. There was never a pregnancy, he had said. 5 words that shattered everything. The ultrasound screen still glowed softly on the wall, blank and blue. Ava Monroe sat hunched over on the edge of the examination table, her hands no longer resting on her stomach because there was no baby. Only silence and consequences. Jack Callahan stood beside his daughter Emily, hand resting gently on her shoulder. He wasn't sure if he felt heartbreak or relief, maybe both. I didn't plan to hurt anyone, Ava said quietly. It just started with a lie, and then I didn't know how to stop. Jack didn't speak. He didn't trust himself to. Dr. Grace Howard's voice came through from the phone, still on the video call, calm, professional, devastating. Ava,
What you've described is a form of medical deception that could carry both legal and psychological consequences.
You'll need to speak with both law enforcement and a licensed mental health professional. Ava nodded slowly, her face blotched with shame. I'll cooperate. Dr. Grace turned to Dr.
Logan, who had collapsed into the rolling chair in the corner. And you, Dr. Pierce, your license will be suspended effective immediately pending investigation. The board will review the full scope of your involvement. If you have any integrity left, you'll give them everything. Logan only nodded. Jack looked at them both. Two people who had built a fantasy around his life, his heart, his daughter, his desire for a family. You weren't just lying to me, he said. You were lying to a child. To Emily. Ava looked at the little girl across the room. I'm sorry, she whispered. Emily didn't look angry. She looked tired. As the three of them stepped out of the exam room, Jack paused by the reception desk. He handed a card to the clinic assistant. This is for law enforcement and for Ava's legal counsel when they call. I want full transparency on everything that happened here. Whitaker met them in the lobby. How bad was it? He asked quietly. Jack exhaled. Worse than I expected. But at least now it's done. Is it? Jack looked down at Emily, who was still clutching her notebook. He shook his head. Not quite. That night, back home, the Callahan house felt still. Not peaceful, not yet, just still. Emily sat at the kitchen island with a glass of warm milk, eyes scanning her notes one more time, not because she doubted herself, but because it had become her ritual. It grounded her. Jack sat across from her, slowly turning a teacup in his hand. She fooled me, he said softly. She knew exactly what I wanted. Emily didn't look up. People like that always do. He blinked. People like what? She finally met his eyes. People who are scared they'll never be loved. They learn how to pretend, how to perform, but they don't know how to just be real. Jack swallowed the lump rising in his throat. You think she ever really cared about us? Emily considered that. I think she cared about not being left, and she thought a fake baby would make you stay. Jack nodded slowly. She wasn't wrong. I probably would have stayed, for the baby. Emily reached out and touched his hand. You stayed for me. That did it. Jack pulled her into his arms and held her tightly, burying his face in her shoulder. You're everything I'll ever need, he whispered. I know, she said, hugging him back. But you had to learn that the hard way. The next morning, Jack met with Dr. Grace and Miss Thelma at his downtown office. Legal teams had already been notified. Reports were filed. But more than that, protocols were being rewritten. I want a new system, Jack said. For all our clinics, if someone claims pregnancy for legal or financial matters, we need independent verification. Third-party ultrasound review. Chain of custody files. No more trusting the doctor. We've already drafted something, Miss Thelma said. We're calling it the Callahan Standard. Jack smiled faintly. You mean Emily's standard? They all nodded. She caught it, Dr. Grace said. She saw what trained professionals missed. She's 8, Jack replied. 8 years old, and she saved me from a lifetime of deception. You raised her well. Jack looked out the window for a moment. No. She raised herself well. I just stayed out of her way. Meanwhile, at home, Emily sat at the window seat where she liked to study chess moves. But today, she wasn't thinking about queens and rooks. She was thinking about forgiveness and the difference between understanding someone and trusting them again. She didn't hate Ava. She couldn't. Hating someone meant they still had power over your feelings. Emily just felt sad. Sad for Ava. Sad that someone would rather build a fantasy than risk being real. But more than anything, she felt proud. Proud that she had trusted her instincts, proud that she'd spoken up even when it meant ruining a party, even when no one wanted to hear it. Because sometimes the truth was inconvenient, but it was still the truth. That evening, Jack tucked Emily into bed.
"Do you think Ava's getting help?" she asked. "I think so," he said. "She's in a place now where people can actually help her.
Real doctors, real therapists, not just someone she's trying to impress."
"Good," Emily said. "Because pretending to be okay never really makes you okay." Jack kissed her forehead. "You're too wise for your age." "I read a lot," she said sleepily. As he stood to leave, she added, "And Daddy?" "Yes? I'm glad it was me." "What was?" "The one who told you the truth." Jack smiled.
"So am I." Ava Monroe sat alone in the grey-walled interview room of the county's psychiatric evaluation center. The sunlight filtering through the narrow window had turned orange, casting long shadows across the table. Her hands were still trembling, though it had been 3 days since the truth came out. No baby, no pregnancy, no more pretending. Just consequences. When the door opened, she expected a therapist. Instead, it was Jack Callahan. For a moment, she couldn't speak. Her breath caught in her throat, her eyes darting to the floor. "I wasn't sure if you'd come," she whispered. Jack didn't sit down right away. He stood by the wall, hands in his pockets, looking at her with a mixture of sorrow and something she hadn't expected, compassion. "I wasn't sure either," he replied. They sat in silence for a long moment. Finally, Ava broke it. "Everyone thinks I'm a monster." Jack shook his head slowly. "No, they think you're someone who did a terrible thing." "That's not better," she said bitterly. "No," he agreed. "But it's more human." She looked up at him, her eyes rimmed red. "I didn't mean to hurt your daughter." Jack's voice was quiet. "But you did. I know. And you tried to manipulate me," he added, "into loving you for something that didn't exist." Her hands curled into fists. "I didn't think I was worth loving on my own." That stopped him. Ava stared at the table, words tumbling out like a confession no one had asked for, but maybe she'd been waiting to speak for years. "My dad left when I was 12, she began. "Just didn't come home one day. My mum fell apart after that. Every man I trusted after that either cheated, ghosted, or left the second things got hard." She laughed without humor. "When I got diagnosed with endometriosis at 26 and was told my chances of having kids were slim, my fiancé at the time walked out that same week, said he wanted a real family." Jack sat down quietly across from her. "I thought, if I could give someone what they wanted, a baby, a family they wouldn't leave," Ava continued. "So I learned to play the part, be soft, be sweet. Be whoever they needed." She looked at him, eyes hollow. "But no one ever stayed." Jack let the silence settle before speaking. "And that's why you faked the pregnancy." "With help from a doctor who'd done it before," she nodded. "Dr. Logan. He was desperate too. He'd lost everything in his divorce. We met at a support group. One night we got drunk, and I told him my idea. He didn't even blink, just said, let's make sure we do it right." She wiped her nose with a tissue. "It was supposed to be simple. Get engaged, build trust, say I lost the baby around month 5. Leave with dignity. No one would get hurt, but then, your daughter." Jack's eyes darkened. "Emily," Ava smiled faintly. "She saw through me faster than anyone ever has. She reminded me of who I used to be before I started lying just to be loved." Jack studied her. Not as a victim, not as a villain, but as someone wounded. Terribly, deeply wounded. "I'm not here to yell at you," he said quietly. "I'm not even here for an apology." "Then why?" she asked. "Because you need to know that this ends here. You don't get to keep bleeding on people who didn't cut you." Ava blinked. Jack leaned in slightly. "You're not evil, Ava, but you are dangerous when you let your pain drive your choices." She looked down. "I'm not going to press full charges," he added.
But you will cooperate with the investigation. You will surrender all evidence, and you will get help. I've already agreed to a full inpatient treatment plan, she said softly. They're calling it a compulsive deception and attachment disorder. Apparently, I check every box. Jack nodded. Good. Before he stood to leave, she looked up again. Do you think she'll ever forgive me? Emily? Jack didn't answer right away, but then he smiled, just barely. She probably already has, he said. But forgiveness isn't the same as forgetting or trusting. You'll need to earn that back if you ever see her again. Ava nodded slowly. That's fair. Jack walked to the door, then paused. One more thing, he said. She looked up. He met her eyes. Real love doesn't come from pretending to be someone else. It comes from telling the truth even when it scares the hell out of you. Then he left. Back at home, Emily was sitting by the fireplace, drawing diagrams of the human heart from memory. She looked up as Jack entered. How was she? She asked. Broken, Jack said honestly, but trying. Emily nodded. I don't hate her, she said. I know. I just don't ever want her around again. Jack sat beside her. That's okay too. She leaned her head on his shoulder. Do you think she'll ever understand what she did? I think she's starting to. They sat in silence for a while. The fire crackled. The storm had passed. And what remained was the kind of peace that only truth could build. 6 weeks had passed since the day everything unraveled. The fake pregnancy, the manipulated medical records, the confession from Ava Monroe, and the collapse of Dr. Logan Pierce's career. Jack Callahan hadn't given a press conference. He hadn't written a tell-all article. He hadn't posted anything online. Instead, he had chosen something harder. He chose healing. On a quiet Wednesday morning, Jack stood before a panel of senior leaders from the National Association of Family Clinics. He wore no tie, just a charcoal blazer, a black shirt, and the look of a man who had learned something the hard way. This isn't about me, he said. This is about what slipped through our systems. What could have hurt more than just me and my daughter? He tapped the manila folder in front of him. I've included recommendations. We're calling it the Callahan Standarda, new set of safeguards to verify claims involving prenatal care when tied to legal or financial responsibilities. One of the board members frowned. Won't that create distrust between patients and doctors? Jack nodded. Yes, but only for those who've weaponized trust in the first place. He leaned in slightly. This isn't about controlling women's healthcare. This is about protecting the integrity of our field and the families who depend on it. The room went silent. Then slowly, people began to nod. Meanwhile, back at home, Emily Callahan was working on a science project on emotional intelligence. Her title? How to Know When Someone's Telling the Truth. She had a poster board split into 2 sides, words versus patterns. People lie with words, she told her father that night, but not with behavior. Not for long. Jack looked at her, full of admiration and sadness. You shouldn't have had to learn that at 8. Emily shrugged. Maybe not. But I'm glad I did. Then after a pause, do you think she meant it? That she wanted to be part of our family? Jack sat down beside her. I think she wanted to belong somewhere. I think her pain made her believe that lies were her only way in. Emily nodded. I still don't want to see her again. Jack smiled gently. You don't have to. The next day, a letter arrived. From Ava, not to Jack, but to Emily. It was written in small, careful handwriting. Dear Emily, I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm just hoping you know that none of this was your fault. You were the only one brave enough to ask the questions no one else wanted to. I've started therapy. Real therapy. I'm learning how to stop performing and start existing. I don't expect to be part of your life again, but I'll always be grateful that you told the truth when I couldn't.
With quiet respect, Emily folded the letter and tucked it into the back of her notebook.
She didn't say anything about it for days, but later that week when Jack found her sitting at her usual window seat, she whispered, "I think she meant it." Jack didn't ask what. He just sat beside her.
That weekend, Jack visited Dr. Grace Howard's hospital in the city, not as a patient, not as a victim, but as a partner. Together, they co-hosted a panel on ethics, attachment, and deception in clinical environments. It wasn't about blame. It was about education. Dr.
Grace introduced him. Mr. Callahan is not just a healthcare executive, he's a father. And it was his 8-year-old daughter who noticed what none of us did. There was polite laughter, followed by quiet awe. Jack stepped to the microphone.
She didn't do it because she was a genius, he said.
She did it because she paid attention, because the people she loved mattered to her more than being polite. He looked out at the room full of doctors, administrators, and students. If we build systems that reward comfort instead of truth, he continued, we're setting families up to fail. And the consequences go far beyond medical records. They live in the hearts of the people left behind. That night, back home, Jack and Emily played chess on the living room floor. She moved her bishop with surgical precision. "You know what I realized?"
"What's that?" Jack asked. "You didn't get angry."
Jack raised an eyebrow.
"When?"
"When Ava confessed," Emily said.
"You didn't yell. You didn't want her punished. You just wanted it to stop."
Jack sat back, studying the board.
"I think I realized something. Punishment doesn't heal people. Understanding does." Emily made a face.
"But sometimes people do deserve consequences."
"Oh, absolutely," Jack said.
"But consequences and revenge aren't the same thing." She thought about that, then nodded.
"I think I like our family the way it is," she said. Jack smiled. "Me too." A week later, Jack got a call from the Medical Ethics Board. They'd voted unanimously to adopt the Callahan Standard. It would now be policy not just in his clinics, but in several hospital systems across 3 states. The official documentation credited the Callahan family. Jack read that part twice, then smiled. As summer approached, Jack and Emily returned to their old weekend tradition, pancakes, park walks, and second-hand bookstore adventures. One day, as they sat under a tree, Emily leaned her head on his shoulder.
"You think I'll ever forget this?" she asked.
Jack thought for a moment.
"Maybe the details,
but not the lessons." She closed her eyes. "I hope not." They sat in silence, the kind that doesn't need to be filled, because healing isn't always loud. Sometimes it's the quiet return to normal that means the most. The news came in the form of a formal letter, thick envelope, embossed seal. Inside, a signed resolution from the National Medical Ethics Council. Jack Callahan unfolded the paper slowly, his eyes scanning the opening paragraph. Then the second, then the title, the Callahan Protocol. Jointly named in honor of Jack Callahan and his daughter, Emily Callahan, whose vigilance and integrity uncovered a case of medical deception that led to systemic reform across the healthcare sector. He stared at the page for a long moment, then called out into the hallway, "Emily?" She padded in, barefoot, carrying a popsicle and a book on microbiomes. "What's up?" Jack handed her the letter. She read it once, then again. Then her mouth slowly curved into a smile. "They named it after me too." Jack nodded. "They should have named it only after you." Emily sat down at the dining table, legs swinging above the floor. "So what does this mean?" Jack leaned back in his chair. "It means hospitals and clinics across the country now have to follow stronger guidelines when verifying pregnancy claims, especially when those claims are tied to legal or financial commitments." Emily tilted her head. "To protect people like you? To protect people like us?" She grinned. "Cool.
3 months later, Jack stood in front of a small crowd at a medical conference in San Diego. He wasn't there to pitch a product or expand his clinic empire. He was there to speak as a father. Sometimes, he began, the most important truth you'll ever hear doesn't come from a physician or a lab result. It comes from someone small, someone everyone else might ignore. A few chuckles from the crowd. He smiled. My daughter isn't a doctor. She's not even in high school. But she noticed what no one else did. Because she wasn't blinded by what she wanted to believe, she just saw what was there. His voice softened. And that saved me. Saved my family. Maybe now, with this new protocol, it'll save others too. Applause filled the room, but Jack didn't take a bow. He just stepped off the stage and returned to his seat beside Emily, who had come along with him, of course. Later that night, back in the hotel room, Emily sat on the balcony, watching the California sunset smear pink and gold across the sky. Can I tell you something weird? She asked. Jack, lying on the bed in a Callahan Clinics t-shirt and jeans, looked up. Always. I don't think I'd undo what happened. He sat up. You don't? She shook her head. It was scary and messy, but now you listen better. We talk more, and I think I know who I am in a way I didn't before. Jack nodded slowly. I feel that too. Emily turned to face him. And you didn't try to fix it with anger. You fixed it with honesty. Jack crossed to the balcony and sat beside her. Because you showed me how. She rested her head on his shoulder. Well, someone had to. The next morning, Jack received a text from Miss Thelma. Just finished training new staff on the Callahan protocol. The young ones think Emily should run the clinic. Not joking. Jack laughed aloud. He showed the text to Emily. She considered it for a moment. If I run the clinic, do I still get snack breaks? Unlimited, Jack said. Then maybe. Across town, Ava Monroe sat in a quiet therapist's office. No makeup, no pretense, just her. She had been in counseling for over 4 months, slowly unpacking the years of abandonment, self-sabotage, and lies she had used as armor. The healing wasn't fast, and it wasn't clean, but it was real. One day she hoped to write a book about what she did, not to excuse it, but to own it. To give it language, to help someone else avoid becoming what she had. She never contacted Jack or Emily again, but every time she passed a clinic with the Callahan name, she nodded silently to herself. They didn't destroy me, she thought. They saved me, even when they didn't have to. Back home, summer melted into fall. The air turned crisp. Leaves curled red and gold along the fence line. One Saturday morning, Jack and Emily were back at their favorite breakfast spot, splitting a stack of blueberry pancakes. She was halfway through a story about a kid in her class who swore he invented a new color when Jack asked, "Do you ever think about what's next?" Emily paused. For me? For us. She took a sip of orange juice. I think we keep doing what we're doing. Being honest. Paying attention. Protecting people, Jack smiled. Like superheroes. Emily shrugged. Superheroes with notebooks. He raised his coffee cup. To that. She tapped her glass against his. To that. That night, back home, Jack pulled a small plaque from his briefcase. He handed it to Emily. Truth is stronger than pretending. The Callahan family presented in recognition of integrity, courage, and the power of paying attention. Emily stared at it, then looked up. Can I hang it in my room? Jack ruffled her hair. It was made for it. As she ran upstairs, Jack paused at the staircase. So much had changed. So much had almost been lost. But here they were, two people, a little bruised, a lot wiser, and more whole than ever. Sometimes life breaks you in strange places. But if you let it, it rebuilds you stronger, not perfect, but real. And in a world full of false promises and soft-voiced lies, that's the only kind of legacy
worth leaving behind. Life doesn't always warn us before it tests us. Sometimes the people we let into our homes and hearts come with stories built on fear, not truth. But this isn't just a tale about deception. It's a lesson in paying attention, in listening to instincts, even when they come from the smallest voices, like a child's quiet courage to speak up. Jack Callahan's story reminds us that forgiveness isn't weakness, it's wisdom. He didn't seek revenge, even when deeply hurt. He chose to heal, to rebuild, and to protect others through action, not anger. His daughter Emily teaches us that truth, even when uncomfortable, is the first step toward genuine love and lasting trust. For many of us who've lived through heartbreak, loss, and hard choices, this story is a reminder. We can't change the past, but we can shape what comes next. With honesty, with compassion, and with the quiet bravery of doing what's right even when no one is looking. Because legacies aren't built from perfection. They're built from how we respond when things fall apart.